it's a risk, but to change things, you have to deal with risks, of course, because nothing happens if you don't risk.
I had such a great time chatting with today's guest. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are talking today with Valentina Ciardelli. And we dug into so many cool topics. Valentina is a junior fellow at Trinity Conservatory in London. She's a former student of Leon Bosch, and she is exploring the world of double bass chamber music in a really interesting way. And we dig into one of my favorite composers that I think I have never spoken about on the 500 plus episodes of this podcast. That's Frank Zappa. So we go deep into Frank Zappa and how she discovered his music and has transcribed it for the bass and various other ensembles. We also dig into chamber music for the bass and why we feel certain limitations and how we can overcome those. Really, really interesting topics. I'd like to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, A440 Violin Shop, Upton Bass, the Bass Violin Shop, D'Addario Strings, and Steve Swan String Bass. More on them later, but let's dig into this conversation with Valentina Ciardelli. Right now, you're at Trinity right now.
I finished.
Okay.
I studied for like the previous 1.5 years with Leon Bosch.
Okay, right.
And now he's kind of mentoring me, but I'm done with college. And I'm junior fellow at Trinity actually now.
Okay.
There is like I don't know if in American you have junior fellow position as well. Probably yes. In the US.
I think it's called something different. Maybe it's like a postgrad, or they call it a fellowship. But but there's a similar sort of setup here.
Yeah, basically you're like a kind of junior teacher.
Yeah.
Like a kind of assistantship to the major teachers, and you make tutor for students and stuff. And I've like got this position that it's a trust basically from an external donor. For soloists, and actually this is the first time a bass player won it.
Wow, really?
Yeah, because it's just one place for all instruments, and it has never happened that a bass like got it. But I proposed also this project about chamber music and valuing the solo position of the bass, that we kind of need this because we're still stuck in like a kind of ground position. You know what I mean? I mean, it's important to have us in orchestra and everything, and probably the 99% of the bass player wants to play in orchestra, and that's great because without us, the orchestra doesn't happen.
Right.
But for the people that would like to do something else, it's like, I don't know, other aspects in life, nobody is the same, and they want to do something else with the bass. We should have to have the possibility and the same platform as a violin player, as a piano player, as a singer, you know, because the first mistake, it's like compare us to violins or to cello. We're not cello, we're not violin. We have our own identity and we can play wonderful music on the bass. We don't need to copy people, no? Right. And that's the problem with concert goer. I tried it on a personal experience. There are people that are open-minded and they think, yeah, why not? Let's try it, no? Mm-hmm. I just want to call it a more USA mentality. You're so much open, guys, in this aspect. So much.
Really?
Like,
Yeah,
not in the bass thing, but I just like have this sensation from USA people in every kind of aspect, like I don't know, revolutionary stuff in the 20th century. You get very strong in that aspect, no? In Europe, it's a bit more still close now, conservatory, Victorian, New Age period, you know?
Okay, sure.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, concert goer are, or like artist manager, are very afraid they don't have public, they don't have money back to organize or invest in bass player. Mm-hmm. And that is actually a circle that's impossible to break if we reason like that, because we cannot have the possibility till someone start to trust in us, no?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And it's a risk, but to change things, you have to deal with risks, of course, because nothing happens if you don't risk. And I have like, even last week, I have like such a kind of weird experience with one of these agencies. There is like an important agent here in London called YCAT. I don't know if you never heard about that. Yeah, and I went to this meeting for young performers, and I just like, okay, let's see what they say. And they were really excited, like, yeah, we have to change the world. We have to be original, doing your stuff. Yeah. And then after this meeting, everybody could speak with the artist director. And I went there. They were all violin players, piano players, of course. I was the only bass player, of course. And I went there, I said to him, hello, I'm Valentina, blah, blah, blah. I'm a bass player, I'm a freelance, and I'm mostly solo and chamber musician. And he just like looked at me, he laughed on my face and said, how do you think you will survive in your life? And I was like, I really said, sorry, can you repeat that? Like, you said 5 minutes before we have to change things, and you laugh because I'm doing something different. You know, this is the major aspect that it's very frustrating for, like, my point of view, because I can fail, but I would like to have the fault of failing, not to be stopped from other people, no? Mm-hmm. So that's the thing.
Yeah, it's such a challenge, and it's something, and you know, some groups here in the United States have started to break out in terms of the chamber music thing, doing their own thing. A couple examples are Time for Three. Renan Meyer is the bass player for that group, and they've been around for probably coming up on 20 years at this point. Simply Three is another group that and Nick Villalobos, but it's really it's still very much the exception rather than the rule. Like if you're a violinist, just like you're saying, or you're a pianist or a cellist, you know, chamber music career is much more possible, it seems, or accepted.
Yeah. It's like I feel like, do you know LGBT community? Yeah. We are the LGBT community of the string players. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, when you speak with people, they try to be very polite, like, oh, yeah, bass player, nice. Oh, my God, very nice. And then when you touch their ground, like, they just get scared. Like, no, you can't do this. No. And I feel like, what? It's very, I can't believe how close people are still, no? And I feel also the bass community, we are too much close with each others. We don't open. Nobody knows the marvelous thing we are doing. It's like we say bass festival, but it's just there between us and just like saying things very like, okay, nobody has to know what we are doing, you know?
Yeah, so, that's such a challenge. You're hitting on such an important point. And you know, I was having a conversation at Bass Europe this summer with Vasily Papavasily, and the wonderful Greek bass player and teacher, and he was hitting on that same exact thing. We do such a good job of marketing and promoting and having these amazing events within the community, and it's really exciting to have these bass events. But then, how do we get that energy out to the wider world? How do we get, because it really is exciting, and when you get composers in there, or you get people who aren't maybe in the bass world, and they see that energy and they see what is possible, they're really excited. But there's still that sort of traditionalist, maybe musically conservative wall. Right. Yeah.
And it's like the fear to, because I have the sensation also, if we really break this wall, we have a lot of opportunities, and maybe like the kind of classical environment or like music industry, it's afraid to just like have cut space from another for other instrument. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's like this powerful, but I'm trying really to create a kind of dust now, to just like say hello guys, like for my point of view, and I need all the community with me. I need like a young generation of bass player. There are few of people they're doing solo, and we really trust in what we are doing. And the thing is also, when I think about bass competition, we don't need to make bass competition we should need to get unified and just go around and just play together, not like making competition, because also competition, it's not useful for our kind of career, because it's just like, it's attract only a very, very small part of audience and public. And if we keep playing only the same competition piece like Bottesini and stuff like that, it will not get us the possibility to shine in front of people. We have to follow what Bottesini did. He started to bring like a known tune, like opera's tune in the worldwide with the bass. So people associate songs that they knew with the sound of the bass, and that's quite clever. But we have a bit stopped this kind of rock star environment, you know what I mean?
Right,
and we are like, I'm so also tired to just look like the funny guy on the edge that is doing crazy harmonics. Oh, you can do that on the bass, it's amazing. It's like, just listen what I'm playing, not like how fast I play or the harmonics, no? Like a freak show, no?
Right.
We look a bit like freaks, no?
Yeah. It's that's the role that bass players, have played for a lot, and in so many ways. And so, how do we get beyond that? How do we, This episode is brought to you by the Bass Violin Shop, which opened in 2001 as a small double bass workshop in Greensboro, North Carolina. Today, they're staffed by 3 full-time, highly skilled bass luthiers, and they specialize in double bass sales, rentals, setup, restoration, and repair. For nearly 20 years, they have satisfied thousands of clients by offering quality instruments, knowledgeable service, reliable repairs, and superior restorations at affordable prices. Whether resetting your sound post, installing a new bridge, or giving your fingerboard one of their precision dressings, the Bass Violin Shop will work with you to improve your setup. They also specialize in resetting necks, repairing cracks, installing new fingerboards, and new bass bars. Whatever your playing needs, they will listen carefully to you and work hard to get the most out of your instrument without blowing your budget. For more information and current inventory, visit their website at bassviolinshop.com and be sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram. This episode is brought to you by the A440 Violin Shop. It's located just down the street from Wrigley Field in beautiful Chicago on the north side, just off the Brown Line. I have been going there my entire adult life, and they have been fantastic, both for repairs. I've had cracks repaired. I've had seams glued. I've had all sorts of students go to A440 to get instruments, to get bows. They're available with a smile, do wonderful work, and definitely check them out if you are in the Midwest. A440violinshop.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by D'Addario Strings. Our friends at D'Addario want to help listeners change their strings safely and efficiently, and they have a few tricks to help you achieve that. What happens if strings aren't quite the right size for your instrument? For instance, if you play a 5/8 bass, when strings are slightly too large for an instrument, the tension will be lower. And when strings are slightly too high for an instrument, the tension will be higher. Learn more at orchestral.daddario.com. And thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. And that's a real challenge, and exploring this different repertoire. Something that I know you've been passionate about for a long time is Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
And I am a huge Frank Zappa fan. So I am just can't say, I for decades at this point, I owned not every Zappa album, but almost every Zappa album. His You Can't Do That on Stage Anymore, his 12 CD set. I had the box set with the wooden box on my desk for years and years. So so I got to ask, I remember, this is going back in time. I was a student in 1995. It was just a few years after Zappa died. We did a tribute to Frank Zappa concert at Northwestern University in the Chicago area. And I remember playing, and boy, this is insanely difficult. I mean, the level of what he did was just phenomenal. So talk to me about Zappa. I never get to geek out with anybody about Zappa. What do you love about his music? When did you start discovering it and working it into what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I was 11.
Okay.
Because I was a piano player actually, and I discovered his music through Deep Purple, because you know in Smoke on the Water they're speaking about Frank Zappa and the Mothers.
Yeah.
And actually, I had no idea who Frank Zappa was, but I thought, okay, if Deep Purple are talking about this guy, he might be good.
Right.
And I went to a music shop. Can you imagine like an 11 years old girl, like very like, you know, I went to the shop and I asked the man, do you have any Frank Zappa recording? And the man looked at me like, Frank Zappa? I was like, yes. and he had only one album, that it was The Grand Wazoo.
Okay.
And I bought it with the only money I had, like from like presents and stuff like that. I went home, I put it on the CD player of my dad, and I just play it. And I played over the whole afternoon, like, I don't know, 3-4 times. And I was like, with this face, like, what is, I just love it. I just love it. I went crazy. Since this moment, I start to transcribe like compulsively, like his album for my whole teenage time. My mother always tell to people, it's quite embarrassing, but when I was 14, I tried to put my first band on. I was still a piano player, because I started to play bass at the age of 20, quite late actually. Yeah, I was not. I neither even know what a bass was before, and so she just like caught me crying on my bed. I was 14. I was like, oh my god, I was crying, and she thought, oh, maybe she's crying for a guy. Oh, this is normal. And then she came, oh, Valentina, don't worry, it's normal to cry for this thing. Who breaks your heart? And I was like, Mom, I never play Frank Zappa's music with no one. They keep escaping, because I was bringing the score that I transcribed to these guys, and they were like, what is this music, you know? And I was crying because I could not play Frank Zappa at the age of 14. Yeah, it's very sick, I know, but it's kept like, basically my whole life has been influenced, like in a kind of personal way, like behave way or stuff like that, by Frank Zappa. In a good way, I think, because he literally saved my mind so many times, just, you know, from a lot of things. It's a very special gift that I think life gave to me, to discover his music so soon.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful about that. And I think when I start to play bass, I found that the bass nature is so matching with Frank Zappa's music. And I start to adapt his songs to as a chamber work to the bass, because unfortunately he died too young, and he was going into acoustic music, acoustic instruments, and probably he ended up also to write concertos or stuff like that for instrument. We cannot know that. So I'm kind of trying to respect what he was doing, and to value my own instrument, and to create that kind of tradition in it.
Well, it's beautiful, and it's so great that you're inspired by Zappa. I feel so strongly about everything you're talking about. I've had the same experience. I was, I think, 16, 17 when I discovered him. But you're so right about that later phase of his life, like the late 80s into the early 90s. He was going in all sorts of interesting directions, because he made that London Symphony album, so you could hear some of those pieces. But he also did the Yellow Shark with Ensemble Moderne, or I guess they did that album not too long after his. And then there was this really cool album that was released after his death called Civilization Phase 3, I think. Do you remember? Yeah. And it's like this exploration. He was getting to these electronic worlds. I mean, he was so ahead of his time in so many ways, and so deep and multifaceted. And I've got to ask, since we're talking about, I chatted with anybody about Zappa, you know, like who's a bass player. So have you ever read or seen the book? It's titled The Negative Dialectics of Poodle Play. And it's I will send you a link, Valentina, and people listening. I'll send you. It is this philosophical analysis of Zappa and his music and everything he did, and it was written near the end of his life. And the guy interviewed Zappa. Zappa, I don't know if Zappa dug what the guy was doing. It may or may not be what Zappa was actually thinking about it, but it's this unbelievably deep dive into everything he did. I've got one question, Zappa related. Let's let's say someone's listening to this and they've never listened to anything Frank Zappa. You know, there's so much music out there. Like, where the heck do you even start? Like, what would you tell somebody to start with? What would be a good introduction to the world of Frank Zappa?
Oh, it's very difficult because, it's like looking at diamond, no? It's so many colors, which is the right one. Okay. So, because I have this experience to propose Frank Zappa's music. Some people love it, like me. The first time you hear it, it's like, what is this? Or the first time you hear it, you hate it. Mm-hmm. So there is like, it's so extreme like him, no? He doesn't have this kind of, it's black or white, no? Mm-hmm. Probably it's a kind of, I don't want to convince anybody. It's like religion. You cannot right. say you have to trust, you know? Yeah. It's something you have to feel. Probably, I would start with an album like Shake Your Booty.
Okay. Probably. Okay. Sure. Yeah.
Even it's a bit strong of continent, and a lot of people might, if they understand English, think, what is this? He's offending everybody, but it's not actually. It's very provocative, but it's, if you realize even about Bobby Brown, no, and the gay community and LGBT, it was actually one of the first time that they were like protagonists in that strong aspect, even if it's in a sarcastic way, because he just like put in a sarcastic way Catholicism, Jewish people, everybody, no? Yeah. But it's like a kind of grotesque kind of portrait of things that makes you think deeply than what is the actually first impact of the thing, no? It was what he actually meant to do with his music. If you can go across the first impact, it means you have understand the second level, no? Yeah. And in a perspective, in a music perspective, I think Shake Your Booty is good because in piece like, I don't know, Broken Heart Are for Assholes or Flakes, you can hear this is a strong part that it's kind of rock-ish, but there is also a lot of contrapunch parts, like in Flakes especially, when it's like, I'm a moron and this is my wife. You can really string like a strong string parts with contrapoint after this, no? And I know this because I've described everything, so I can and put it in a chamber music acoustic perspective, you can really hear the amount of quality of his way of composing. It's almost like Stravinsky or like Barres or these people. Amazing. So I really advise this album either to like people that like rock or pop music or jazz, or people that are only listen classical music, or especially musicians, because it's giving all like a kind of perspective, like a 360 degrees perspective.
Yeah, it's so interesting, the levels, and it really brings to mind like a lot of artistic movements outside of, I mean, he's such a deep and complex musician. There are so many levels. There's that humor / like in your face kind of level, but then there's this deep complexity under it, and like you're saying, counterpoint, and then this just incredible virtuosity, you know, all the musicians associated with him. It's some of the best instrumental playing you'll ever hear in your life. And then to me, it's music that really has staying power, that people are good. I think that like what you're doing with it, you're starting to explore these different aspects of it. It's like, you know, a lot of composers are not really fully respected or digested in their day, and their greatness becomes apparent, you know, in the future years. And I really think he's somebody like that. And then what he did, you know, even outside of playing, with free speech here in the States, you know, he was really pushing that in these congressional hearings, which is some of the most fantastic and entertaining and thought-provoking transcriptions. I'll try to look that up for people. And even if people just want to, I'll put a link in so people can check this out since we're talking about this. But like one of my favorite things to check out is all his appearances on the Dave Letterman show. And he was on the Dave Letterman show like maybe a dozen times, and he had Moon Unit, his daughter, on there with him once when Valley Girl got really popular, and it's just Yeah, it's just interesting because what a brilliant musician. How is it that Upton Bass came to design a bass for Gary Carr? Well, it all started with an email. Here's Eric and Gary from Upton Bass on how this happened.
Gary was at kind of the forefront of ergonomics in commissioning different bass makers to make ergonomic models to his playing style. And he basically replied. And he said, yeah, but here's what I'm looking for. I want something, that's this, and this.
He sent us sketches.
Oh, and by the way, I want it affordable that anyone going to my car camp could afford it.
This model has become so popular, and Gary Carr even played it for the 50th anniversary International Society of Bassists convention. He was the opening, he gave the keynote speech, and he played 2 beautiful selections on his Upton Bass, his Carr model Upton Bass. Learn more at uptonbass.com, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Steve Swan String Bass, and Steve has been researching top regraduation for many years. Here's Steve on the topic.
I found some old diagrammed bass tops in an old violin making book that had violins, violas, cellos, and only 4 basses from kind of the classic period, the early 1800s. And I took a pattern of kind of a topographical map of thicker in the center end of the bridge, and then the thinnest is right near the edges, just before it flares out and gets strong again. And I put in some measurements that I thought would work, and we use that as a general pattern for top regraduation, and it really works.
You would be amazed how well this technique works. I've been impressed time and time again at how immediately a bass speaks after coming from Steve's shop, and how resonant and beautiful and open the sound is. Learn more at steveswanstringbass.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast, Steve. So anyway, I love that you're exploring Zappa, and I got to ask, so 20 years old, you start playing the bass. What prompted, what made you decide to start playing the bass? What inspired you to do that?
It was quite random, actually.
Really?
Because I really hear, I was in conservatory, and I hear this like beautiful sound, like super deep, like warm sound coming from the corridor. I was actually searching like a room for practicing my piano stuff because I was like doing my piano degree. And I started to open doors, like to search this sound, the source of this sound. And I just like opened this door, and I saw my like first teacher of bass. He was teaching, actually it was Dittersdorf, I discovered after like the 10 but it sounds gorgeous for me at the time. Yeah. Like the most beautiful thing I ever heard in my life because it came from the bass. And I was like, oh my God, can I play this instrument? And I started to play this. And I told to my parents after like 2 months that I started to play bass, and I was like, are you crazy? Like, and I really just like decided to stop to play piano and just go like into bass 100%. And they were like a bit scared at the beginning. It's like, why? It's such a different instrument, and you're such old for to start another instrument. It's like, no. And a string instrument, it's need also a physical approach that if you never had before, it's super difficult. And they were really against that at the beginning. But then I keep like practicing. I was super happy, and they just like give up, and it's like, okay, just play the bass. I don't know. I think it was super random, or I didn't choose it. It's just like I bumped into it. Yeah. And yeah, my life quality in terms of like passion about music and discover thing has improved so much. I mean, piano is a great instrument. I love it, and it's useful that I start to play with the piano, because even in the harmonic aspect or like understand the music structure, piano it's a very good ground to have. But and it helps me, I think, a lot to understand better how to play the bass and what to play on the bass as well. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great. And what a great foundation on piano. And so you're not starting from zero, even though it's a string instrument and the physics or the physicality of it is so different, having that musical foundation and the musical knowledge, Yeah. So I think it's super exciting that you're becoming this advocate for chamber music and new music on the bass, and looking for new opportunities for bass solo careers and especially chamber music, and like, what can we do to help you in the bass community? What are you hoping? What do you see for yourself in 5 years? Just talk to me more about chamber music and the bass, and where you see it going, either for you personally or in general, or what you wish that we, who might not be so involved in that, might want to know.
So probably, first of all, has to wake up a bit the bass community. We are very lazy, I think. No, we are a bit also depressed in this aspect because we don't trust fully in our tools. No,
right.
When I generally speak with colleagues, every level, like beginners, or we are always a bit like, yeah, but we cannot do that much, we're not cello. We're like, Bach suite will always like sounds better on cellos and stuff like that. And that's the mistake. We should not compare ourselves to our instrument. We should be so self-confident and so happy that we look and we sound exactly like a bass. That's the thing. And we should like involve the audience in order to let them like super excited to go on a like bass recital, because the only thing they will see is not a person who is sitting down or standing up very worried like, oh my god, I am in tune or I'm doing the right things, or like this is so difficult, oh my god, because sometimes bass players look a bit like that on the stage. Because we feel the pressure of other instruments that we have to be absolutely competitive with them, and we don't create our own market and our own field, So that's the first thing we should do. And the second thing is stop to fight to each other, because every time you speak with some bass player, even past generation especially, I want to do solo career and I'm doing chamber music, and they look at you like, no, I did not do that, so you cannot do that. You know what I mean? This kind of like generation gap, they always try to discourage, or they say, yeah, find a place in orchestra first, then do your thing. And it will never happen, because I mean, Chavakos doesn't have a place in orchestra, you know what I mean? And it doesn't mean I want to be like Chavakos. It means you have to follow what you feel. If you fail, if you don't achieve it, you can step back. But if you don't try fully, you cannot change things. And that's what I would like also to just like gather other young musician, other bass player of my generation and young generation, just to really trust in, if they have something they trust in. For me, it's Frank Zappa's music and transcription and create new repertoire. If they have their own Frank Zappa figure, they trust in, just translate it in a bass repertoire, in a bass show, in something they would like to achieve. Because we can't be rock star, we can't be soloists. We have only to create our own stage space. And I really would like to see people in, I don't know how many years, just like, oh, tonight I have like a double bass recital, it's such a good thing. And what I am trying to do, and hopefully I can start to collaborate with other colleges or other junior fellow around the world, or even proper teacher, professional senior teacher, like to establish chamber groups. Like, for example, with Boccherini, he established a string quartet, and he started to write a massive amount of music for it. Yeah. I'm trying to establish something like the duo harp and double bass. They work absolutely good together, and we have some examples, but there are so few examples and not with a kind of strong repertoire. And I'm trying like to get it established, or like, I don't know, piano trio, violin, double bass and piano. And it's not playing the Grandot of Bottesini. We have to build a kind of a reliable repertoire with transcription and with new music. I start now to do a circle of Schubert Lieder that it started with Eric Koenig. And it's like a 25 minutes of music dedicated on Schubert Lieder in a kind of chamber way. So you can like propose this kind of music connected with a new repertoire of contemporary composers. And you're not like only doing Grand Duo of Bottesini or other few pieces that it's actually not even it's a piano transcription, so it's not chamber music, So it's this kind of work I'm trying to do. I'm trying to think on the music I really love and I feel attached to, and then translate it for my purpose, like performance purpose, and also find a theatric way of performing it, because each of these pieces, even if you think on Schubert leaders, there are stories. You cannot perform as like empty notes. When you hear a singer singing it, if you understand German, you understand the story. But with an instrument, you cannot really tell the words. So you have to do something else, like search the right nuage of sound, find even like the way you match with a violin in a piano trio, and to imitate the voice of, for example, in our König, the King of Elf, the father and the son, no? Yeah. To just like, it's theater. We are actors after all, no? Mm-hmm. And with such big guy on the stage, you can even more whatever you want, no? You have a good match partner, no?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it's exciting. I love the what you're exploring, and of course, I can't say enough good things about like the Zappa explorations. I just think that's so super cool. Like, I feel like I found a kindred spirit, and I'll be following along with you with what you're doing in terms of chamber music and new arrangements in your career. So I just thank you for that and what you're doing. And people can reach you on Facebook, I'm sure. And if they want to get in touch, any other
Instagram. I have Instagram as well. Then my YouTube channel, that it's under name Zappa Woman.
we will link up to all of that. So that's good, and that's an excellent YouTube channel name.
Yeah.
Thank you, Valentina. Great chat. Folks, follow her on whatever social network you hang out on. We've got links to all of that in the show notes. And I can't wait to see what you do next, Valentina. We'll certainly have you on the show in the future. I'm headed down to the Latin American Bass Festival in Tijuana, Mexico at the end of November. I'm super excited about that. So we should be getting some great interviews there. And 2019 is going to be filled with all sorts of events. I will bring my mics to, you name it, the Pittsburgh Double Bass Symposium, the Chicago Bass Festival, obviously the International Society of Bassists Convention. Definitely go to that. Put that on your calendar. First week of June in Bloomington, Indiana, and many, many other events. So I really thank you for following along with this podcast. We're having a great time here, chatting with people like Valentina and all the people we have in this show. So thank you so much for following along. And thank you to the team who puts these together. They are Steve Hinchy and Michael Cooper, who are editing these episodes, Trevor Jones publishing and promoting them, Mitch Mooring doing the compiling, the audio editing, all that good stuff. By the way, Mitch makes beautiful basses in the Dallas area. Look him up online at mitchmooring.com. And thank you to Krista Copper, who has now gone through every single episode, over 500. Think about that for a second. And has timestamped when we've talked about various topics. Such a valuable thing, and that's going to fuel some upcoming projects. Just wait and see. It's going to be great. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.